Hi, welcome to Talking Legal with TEMPLARS. My name is Dupe Dabiri, Managing Counsel in TEMPLARS. With me is Okabonye Chukwuani, an associate in the finance and Metis practice. So Okabonye, the last time we spoke about the Metaverse, could you please refresh us on what exactly that is?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Dupe. The Metaverse is basically just a digital alternative augmented reality. Basically the future of the internet, where people are supposed to be able to go about their day-to-day activities, but inside the digital space. Right now, it's more of a projection rather than a reality. There's really no real metaverse things for us right now, but it's something that is exciting to think about that could really be the future of society, especially as we shift into a more remote sort of lifestyle in the past couple of years.
Wow, interesting. Sounds like a transition.
Yeah.
And with every transition in society, legal issues follow?
Absolutely. One of the main things that we learn, as a law student in your first years is that with every development in society, law is usually behind the developments. So we're always playing catch up, right? But the interesting thing about the metaverse is that for the first time, or for, a novel time, we actually have a chance to be ahead of the curve. We have a chance to see into the future and predict and legislate and regulate for things before they actually occur.
So what kind of legal issues are we talking about here?
Last time we talked about civil and criminal liability. We talked about enforcement issues, and we talked about IP, intellectual property issues.
Right.
But with the metaverse, there's a wide range of potential legal issues that could possibly pop up because of how novel and innovative the space is. This time we're going to talk about financial and currency controls. We're going to talk about a little bit of cybersecurity and privacy issues, and we're going to talk about content control.
So let's delve into this.
Okay.
I guess it's no surprise that money is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, they say money is the root of all evil, or the root of all problems, right? The weird thing about the metaverse is it seems like it provides a solution to all of life's problems, right? But what glitters isn't always gold. Many people currently think that the metaverse would be a perfect avenue for something like crypto to take control, right? In reality, we see some of the issues with crypto, how it's battling with fiat money, right? But in a metaverse, it seems like you could just have Bitcoin be the currency and there would be no problems. But the thing is, with a metaverse, you have to think in advance, and you have to think some of the legal issues we face today are going to transpose into a potential metaverse.
Exactly.
For example, if you think about, maybe you've chosen to build your metaverse universe on a coin such as the Terra Luna coin, right? And you thought to yourself, yeah, that's going to be the coin for my metaverse, that's going to be the currency. But a couple months ago, the Luna coin underwent a crash from $120 value to, I think, about 0.02 cents in a matter of 48 hours. 99.9% correction, right? And so that would be all the people in your metaverse basically losing all value of their money overnight.
Wow, that would be irrecoverable.
It would be. And you have to think about, how do you account for that, right, legally? So what sort of currency controls are we going to put in place for a metaverse currency, right? Do we regulate it like we regulate securities? Do we have bailout options like we do in, economics now? You have to think about those kinds of things and how they would affect a potential economic future in the metaverse.
Wow, sounds like a huge risk. So what about security and privacy?
Oh man, cybersecurity and privacy is probably, some of the biggest issues with the potential metaverse. Even today, cybersecurity and privacy are some of the major legal issues in the current world. We can all see in recent years what happened with major companies like Facebook and so on and so forth, which is now known as Meta. But ever since the EU GDPR was released a couple of years ago, we've seen a global uptick in privacy regulation, the importance of data protection and compliance. In Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, which was released in 2019, commonly known as the NDPR, right? But these laws don't really encapsulate what would be required to protect data in a metaverse. For example, you think about a metaverse, it's supposed to be like a virtual reality where you're a person in there and you can do everything, right? So what happens if you go to the bathroom? Do you have privacy? What happens if you're taking a shower in the metaverse? Do you have privacy? Or can the creator of the metaverse always see what you're doing? Would you want to argue that you have a fundamental right to privacy in a metaverse? Or would we say that, it's a digital reality, everything goes, anything goes? those are the kinds of cybersecurity and privacy issues that are definitely going to come up, considering, the way human beings behave.
Wow, it just seems like there's so much content to be aware about with the metaverse.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much coming out every day. And speaking about content itself is its own sort of issue, kind of related to cybersecurity and privacy, but it has its own unique considerations, right? In terms of a potential metaverse. When we think about content in the modern day, think about things you post on social media, online, Twitter, Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, right? And the way they regulate that, in terms of what you can and cannot say, what's harmful, what's unlawful, regulators sending you takedown requests or deletion of your account, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about that from a metaverse legal and regulatory perspective is sort of tricky because, what do you do if somebody goes on a metaverse and is spreading illegal things or is, disseminating harmful content? You think about things about like child pornography and things like that. What do you do, right? Do you regulate? Do you stop things like that? Or would people argue like they do today that, oh no, it's social media, it should be free, it's the internet, we have a free right to free speech, unlimited free speech, similar arguments that, we kind of have today. It's kind of difficult to know what would really happen in a metaverse scenario when it comes to content.
Doesn't seem like there's an easy answer to this.
There really isn't, which is why we sort of have to start thinking about it now in advance and using what we have on ground today to predict what could happen in the future. Interestingly, some recent developments in Nigerian law have sort of given us some insight as to how we might regulate or legislate, in a potential metaverse scenario.
Could you elaborate?
Yeah, of course. So recently, the National Information Technology Development Agency, commonly known as NITDA, are working on a draft code for internet intermediaries, a code of practice. And essentially what that code of practice aims to do is to regulate how users upload, share, and disseminate content on internet platforms or internet intermediaries. So you're thinking about things like Twitter, things like Meta, things like Instagram, TikTok. From a Nigerian legal perspective, all of those things are now or soon to be going to be regulated, right? In terms of what you share and what you disseminate. So the code sets out sort of mandatory requirements for these internet platforms to follow in terms of setting down rules, taking down content within a certain period of time, having measures on misinformation and disinformation. And there are some major concerns from lots of stakeholders in the market right now in terms of, the practicality and enforceability of the code.
Okay, I get that. But what does that have to do with the metaverse?
I'm glad you asked. So the interesting thing, right, is that the code aims to regulate content, right, as we're talking about. And content is defined under the code, as any electronic piece of information basically uploaded by a user on these platforms, right? And if you think about a metaverse may fall, at least a Nigerian hosted metaverse, or a metaverse with a lot of Nigerian users, it may fall within the definition of, an interactive computer service platform under the code, which is defined as, any electronic medium where users can disseminate and share and upload information, right? So when you think about it that way, the code could potentially regulate content on the metaverse, right? Which would mean that metaverse platforms would have to comply with the provisions of the code if they are subject to the Nigerian jurisdiction, which is a whole nother question entirely. That leads to, a bunch of potential thorny practical and legal issues for us to consider.
So are you saying that this new Nigerian regulation potentially impacts or applies in the metaverse?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely could. And it's exciting to think about. And depending on who you talk to, it's maybe scary to think about, depending on which side of the coin you are on, right?
Absolutely.
Because what it means is, for example, you could be on your metaverse, and if you're on there and you're using your avatar to share or disseminate illegal or unlawful information or prohibited content, and a user or, a government agency reported your account, right? For sharing that information, that metaverse could be required to take down that content you've shared within 48 hours, right, or 24 hours, depending on the time frame. Or that metaverse could be required to comply with a court order saying, identify the user behind this avatar in connection with an ongoing criminal investigation or something like that. So you might think, oh, I get to just use the metaverse freely, but we have a piece of new Nigerian legislation which could say, actually, no, you are subject to rules, you are subject to, you know, the same laws as you would be in reality, right? And that, you know, some people may have a problem with that, you know, like the metaverse purists who believe that, no, actually, there should be no regulation in this space. We should be free to do whatever we want. There are also people that are worried that, you know, things like the code would, you know, enable, you know, governments to sort of surveil what you're doing on the internet, you know, and be able to report you at will depending on what government channels feel like doing.
Wow, that's really something to think about. You mentioned that some users could report or make complaints under the code or on authorized government platforms.
Absolutely. So the code not only requires that users should have dedicated channels to make reports as to unlawful content or prohibited content, but it also requires platforms to have specific channels dedicated to authorized government agencies like the Nigerian Communications Commission, like the National Broadcasting Commission, and so on and so forth, to make reports as to, you know, users that are disseminating infringing content, right? And that's the tricky thing when it comes to online regulation and, you know, maybe regulating a metaverse is that if you try to do so, you sort of end up encountering the exact same problems that a metaverse was, you know, created to avoid, which is over scrutiny, over regulation, invasion of privacy. You know, people go to the internet to avoid these things, but then when you try to regulate, you sort of end up there anyway, you know, and there's lots of people that are concerned that, you know, the code and regulation like that may be used to stifle free speech. So those sort of things may just translate into a potential metaverse.
Yeah, it's actually fascinating to know that potential regulation in Nigeria could impact the metaverse to be developed years from now. However, is this code operational?
Not right now. You know, ongoing information suggests that it could be operational very soon, but it's not yet operational. And yes, it is absolutely fascinating to think about the fact that, you know, legislation now could affect what's going to happen in the future. I think that's, like I said, when we started, what makes the metaverse such an exciting prospect is that we have an opportunity right now to solve some of the legal issues that we've talked about in advance, to think about the practical enforceability of them right now before they ever happen. And unless we, you know, do so thoroughly and critically, we're not going to be really prepared for the wide host of legal issues that the metaverse is going to pose.
Wow, thank you very much, Okabonye.
No problem.
That was quite insightful.
Anytime.
This has been Talking Legal with Templars. See you next time.